Let me show you how to make lovely squidgy puff stitches with a hack that pulls them together without the extra chain that the traditional puff stitch instructions give. Depending on the pattern, the designer might have given directions for a 3, 4 or 5 yarn around hook or pass puff stitch. Every puff stitch starts with a yarn around hook before the hook is placed into the stitch. For me, my hook placement is through a chain space. Keep a looser than usual tension on that first yarn around hook. Then yarn around hook and pull up a loop by scooping the yarn from the back to the front of the work. That leaves 3 loops on the hook. Notice how I am pulling the loop up a little so that there will be plenty of space for my hook to pass back through at the end of the stitch. I will then be matching that tension for every other yarn around hook in this puff stitch. Yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook and pull up a loop by scooping the yarn from the back to the front of the work. That leaves 5 loops on the hook. That gets repeated again. Yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook and pull up a loop by scooping the yarn from the back to the front of the work. With every part of the puff stitch, 2 loops are added to the hook. So for a 3-pass puff stitch, it would finish with 7 loops on the hook before you move on to the last part of the stitch. I'm making a 5-pass puff stitch, so I need to do 2 more repeats. Yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook and pull up a loop, scooping from the back to the front of the work. That gives me 9 loops on the hook for a 4-pass puff stitch. 1 final repeat, yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook and pull up a loop by scooping the yarn from the back to the front, and that gives me 11 loops on the hook. Now this is where the puff stitch hack differs, in that you don't yarn around hook and pull through all of the loops. Instead, you yarn around hook and you pull through all but one of the loops. So for a 3-pass puff stitch, that would be yarn around hook and pull through 6, leave 1 loop on the hook. A 4-pass puff stitch will be yarn around hook and pull through 8, leaving 1 loop on the hook. And for this 5-pass puff stitch, yarn around hook and pull through 10 loops, leaving 1 loop on the hook. You can see that because I have extended the loops and with every yarn around hook I've matched their tension, my hook just glides through them with ease. That action has pulled together most of the puffs, but I'm left with 2 loops on the hook. And to finish, you simply yarn around hook and pull it through both loops. This leaves just 1 stitch at the top of the puff stitch. Whereas in traditional puff stitches, you would end up with the puff stitch and then you would be directed to also add a chain. This version is neater and it makes stitch counting much easier. Let's go through a 5-pass puff stitch again. Pass 1, yarn around hook, place the hook through the stitch, yarn around hook, pull up a loop, scooping from the back to the front of the work. 3 loops on the hook. Pass 2, yarn around hook, place the hook through the stitch, yarn around hook, pull up a loop. That gives 5 loops on the hook. Pass 3, yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook, pull up a loop. You should have 7 loops on the hook. Pass 4, yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook, pull up a loop. 9 loops on the hook. And the final, pass 5, yarn around hook, place the hook through the same stitch, yarn around hook and pull up a loop. That leaves 11 loops on the hook. And to finish, yarn around hook and pull through all but 1 of the loops. And once you've finished that action, you will be left with 2 loops on the hook. And to finish, yarn around hook and pull through both loops. The secret sauce to a lovely looking puff stitch is pulling up the yarn with every yarn around hook and pull through. This even tension with enough space to pull the hook through leads to really beautiful puff stitches. Good luck!